MK Flyers Online, the fast and simple way to find any kind of business or service locally. Find us at mkflyersonline.co.uk or download the MK Flyers mobile app from your app store. MK Flyers Online proudly supports Seclo Sounds, community radio for Milton Keynes.
To listen to this show again or to find out the other shows we have on the station, please visit www.seclosounds.org. My next guest on my third anniversary show is Frank Brehany from Holiday Travel Watch. Frank's been on the show before. He was on the 13th of January 2014. And if you go to tinyurl.com/Q844FUT, you can hear about the background of Holiday Travel Watch, why they were formed. And also Frank shares his 12 golden rules of travel, which I recommend everybody to follow when they come to booking a holiday, whether with a travel agent or even themselves online. Holiday Travel Watch, I think, are a very important website. When I do public speaking to Rotary clubs and WI groups and that sort of thing, I always say at the beginning, if you're not going to do anything or remember anything from my 30 to 45 minutes talk, just remember Holiday Travel Watch, because their website has some great information and they can help you should you come into a problem with your travel. So I'm really happy that Frank's come back on the special show. We're not going to go into the background of Holiday Travel Watch because I said you can listen to that on that previous podcast from the 13th of January 2014. Or you can visit the website to find out about them. We'll be going through the website address later. We're going to start off by talking about civil aviation and revising its regulations after some court cases. One high-profile one was with Travel Republic. Travel Republic were taken to court by the Civil Aviation Authority because the CAA felt that Travel Republic weren't following the rules. But Travel Republic won, and CAA had to change their rules to try and widen the scope of what they can cover. So we're going to start off by talking about court cases.
Well, that case and essentially other cases was all about financial protection, which is guaranteed, if you like, under the package travel regulations. And the argument was we're agents and we're not selling packages and therefore we're not bound by those regulations. And that has been the argument in recent years. And it has been a grey area about exactly what kind of protection you have or haven't got. So without going into the great history of this, the Civil Aviation Authority decided to introduce a scheme called Flight Plus. And this was apparently designed to remove any ambiguity that existed for the consumer as to whether or not what they were buying was financial protection. And let me just say, the travel industry are always talking about consumer protection, but actually what they're only talking about most of the time is financial protection. They don't like to talk about the wider implications of consumer protection. So anyway, the Civil Aviation Authority introduced Flight Plus. And it is a little bit complicated, so just bear with me, John, while I run through it.
Okay, comfy.
For your listeners, yeah. Essentially, a Flight Plus arises when a flight, an accommodation, and or a car is booked, and the consumer has to request those additional items, the accommodation and or the car, on the same day. And the travel must be for over 24 hours, and the flight must start in the UK, but internal UK flights are not included. There can be an exception if, say, for example, you take the ferry out, but you return by air. And if you also order other significant tourist services, as the phrase there, so it could be, say, like a 2 or 3 day excursion or something like that, they have to also be included into the Flight Plus if requested on the same day. If you buy or are sold another's package holiday, but you add bits onto it at the same time, the same day, those bits have to be covered as a Flight Plus under the agents-owned ATOL. And what all of that does, it provides obligations on the arranger of your holiday. And essentially what they have to do is to replace part of the trip that's been affected, say, for example, if service suppliers fail or something like that. And that is at no cost to you, the consumer, or the arranger has to provide a refund. Now, it kind of mirrors what's in the package travel regulations and the ATOL scheme. But what Flight Plus does is it brings in, if you like, the so-called DIY holiday elements into the ATOL scheme. So I think that's probably the best and the simplest, I have to say, simplest way of summarizing that. But it is really about bringing, as I say, these DIY providers into the ATOL scheme.
With the package travel regulations from 1992 and the Flight Plus, sometimes people believe that although they're covered by the Flight Plus, they're not exactly the same as what a package holiday would be. If something goes wrong, the agent says, we only have to help you get a substitute. You still have to pay the difference. Whereas a package holiday, if the difference was too high, then you could get all your money back. So do you feel that people are not fully aware that there isn't quite the same amount of protection with a Flight Plus as there is with a package holiday?
Actually, it's a good point, John, because we often hear from consumers who tell us that they've written to the Civil Aviation Authority, or ATOL, to complain about, for example, the quality of their holiday. Mm-hmm. So they have this confusion, if you like, about what ATOL and the package travel regulations is about. And so the principal difference is that, for example, Flight Plus we've been talking about is only about financial protection. That is ATOL, in other words, and the obligation to provide that protection. Whereas the package travel regulations provides that financial protection, but in addition, for example, it provides consumer protections on what's said in brochures, significant changes to your holiday, either pre the holiday or post, whilst you're actually on holiday, or indeed, and more importantly, who is responsible if that holiday should go wrong. And that is the problem I think the consumers have, because I think it's down to this phrase, consumer protection. And Flight Plus ATOL does not provide the same level of consumer protection as the package travel regulations, as you pointed out at the intro to this question.
Flight Plus isn't perfect, and because of that, it's having another upgrade, and this upgrade includes extra financial accountancy restrictions for travel agents. But it also has a loophole, which it's always had, which allows non-travel companies to book leisure travel for people and not have to offer the financial protection at all. What is this loophole they're using? Well,
John, trying to figure your way through the CAA and ATOL rules is trying to walk through treacle, quite frankly. Again, I've looked at the various government consultations and their reports and everything else, and it really is difficult to establish what is going on from a consultation, government or CAA point of view. There's certainly nothing, even this morning, before I came on air, there was nothing this morning on the Civil Aviation website which sets out what the stricter accountancy rules might be. I think the closest that I came to was, I was aware of their briefing notes on policy, particularly towards advices that they give to accountants. And I think there's two areas where abuse can potentially creep in. And the first is what they call the small business ATOL, which is given to a business that is selling no more than, or should I say less than 500, 500 holidays a year. Now, the problem with this is that if you get a small business ATOL, there are no financial checks carried out because it's designed to be less intrusive in terms of helping businesses to operate. It's this old adage, less red tape and so on. But if you think about this, if you have a business that's selling, say 400, 450 holidays a year, £1,000 a throw, that's quite a turnaround. That's quite a turnover for any business. And consumers need to have confidence that that if they're buying from, say, such an ATOL holder, that they are financially sound. I mean, we called through the government inquiry for a fitness to trade test. And you won't be surprised to hear that our great suggestion wasn't carried through. Now, there are exceptions within the small business ATOL, but that's more to do if there is a greater risk of them exceeding the 500 or if they've been previous ATOL holders and so on. But I think what is more worrying is the so-called agent for the consumer. And this is somebody who is not necessarily a travel agent, who will make arrangements. It's a bit like somebody you say, well, can you go out and do the shopping for me? So you hire them to go out and do the shopping, and that's effectively what you're asking an agent to do. They may well be somebody who has no travel experience at all, and they are effectively putting together a package without the necessary licensing or, dare I say, financial checks in place. And the government, we certainly in this inquiry, we highlighted the fact that this was a bit of a risk to consumers. It presented a situation where there was no security as far as monies was concerned, and that really they should be brought into the scheme. Now, the government turned around and said, yes, our view is that we should bring the agent for the consumer into ATOL licensing. But guess what? There's nothing in the Civil Aviation Bill of 2012, and it looks as if it's been kicked into the long grass. So, whatever or how eventually these stricter accountancy rules manifest themselves, for the present, we've got the small business ATOL, which presents a risk, and we've got the agent for the consumer. And, no one, whether it's from Westminster or all the way over to Brussels, seems to be awake to this potential detriment to the consumer.
Seclo Sounds is based at the Old Rectory, the home of our studio partner Interaction MK. They've been bringing arts to life in Milton Keynes for over 35 years. They use the arts to improve the life chances of disabled people and others in challenging circumstances through shared creative activity. These programs help participants to develop creative, personal and social skills. You can visit them at www.interactionmk.org.uk.
You can make comments about the show at facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. My current guest is Frank Brehany from Holiday Travel Watch. We're talking about consumer financial protection when it comes to travel. One thing that's upset the travel trade, or some in the travel trade anyway, is the EU freedom of trade, which means that non-UK based travel companies can sell holidays to UK consumers without having to worry about the stuff that UK based companies have to consider, such as the Flight Plus. So I wanted to know if, as a website to help consumers, whether Holiday Travel Watch have found that companies from outside the UK selling holidays is beginning to cause a problem to consumers.
It's beginning to show its head, that's for sure. It's not necessarily that they're exempt. It means that they can relocate and operate from a member state with less strict laws, which is getting the civil aviation authorities somewhat in a lather. the primary concern for consumers is financial protection, because the Package Travel Directive, for example, has